The U.S.-Korea Free Trade Agreement will open our markets to North Korean goods. Keeping this concealed until Congress approves the agreement is critical to the strategy of getting it passed. Goods that are, say, 65% North Korean content and 35% South Korean content have the right to come into this country duty-free under this agreement. If we block those goods, as we may if we enforce our national security laws, then South Korea gets to raise tariffs and we lose all of the advantages we negotiated for under the agreement. But furthermore, the Kaesong slave labor camp will be eligible for treatment as if it's part of South Korea, and all the goods, 100% Kaesong-made goods, will come into this country with the workers being paid maybe $7 a month without future congressional approval. The agreement is carefully vague in appendix or annex number 22. I've asked the USTR to clarify this. They have refused. They've ignored my letter for the last month and longer. And it is clear that there's enough vagueness there so that future executive branches could act and let those slave labor goods into the United States.
Thank you, Mr. Sherman.
Torn between the vision of hungry North Koreans overthrowing their government and the fact that I don't want to see people hungry. I want to focus my attention on this South Korea Free Trade Agreement because that's something Congress will actually focus on. Right now we've got 40,000 workers there. Would the North Koreans have any difficulty providing 400,000 workers to Kaesong and similar export-oriented labor facilities? Is there any shortage of labor in North Korea? Mr. Carlin or Mr. Newcomb?
In North Korea right now there's a shortage of jobs, but I don't know that they could supply the number that you indicated to replications of Kaesong scattered about the country. I mean, personally, I've never been a big fan of Kaesong because Kaesong requires South Korea to pay North Korea in US dollars. I keep asking them, why don't they use South Korean won? And they don't have a good answer for that. And I also think it's a sort of a money.
No, those US dollars, I'm told that the amount the worker actually gets, and worker, I mean, arguably the word is slave, because when you are forced to do work and your owner, boss, whatever, national government is the one that receives the payment, it's by no means clear that that is a work relationship. Any idea how much they receive?
It's possible that the figure is correct. I haven't looked at this in a couple of years. On the other hand, they line up for these jobs.
Oh, look, it's a very good
just
because the fact that it's better than other things available to North Koreans does not mean that even the word slavery is too strong. So it's certainly it provides foreign currency, U.S. dollars, to the North Korean government. Now, the agreement provides this, the free trade agreement provides that we have to accept into our country anything that's in various categories, including auto parts, anything that's 35% made in South Korea, which means 65% of the work could be done in North Korea. Do any of you have any focus on the trade agreement that would contradict that?
Well, I'd say, sir, the agreement, I think, has provisions that preclude the use of Kaesong goods as part of South
You haven't read Annex 22, which first says that there's nothing in the agreement that says goods that are 65% North Korean, whether they be Kaesong or otherwise, and 35% South Korean are not given access to the U.S. market. Now, it is true that we have laws that might prohibit such import, which means we would be violating the agreement and subject to sanctions by the South Koreans just as soon as we signed it, unless the executive branch removed those restrictions. But if you also look at Annex 22, you'll see that the agreement envisions future discussions in which Kaesong would be considered for purposes of the agreement part of South Korea, so you could have 100% Kaesong-produced goods rather than just 65% Kaesong-produced goods coming into the United States duty-free. And the agreement is cleverly drawn so you can't tell whether any such future decision to count Kaesong as part of, quote, South Korea would require future congressional approval or not. And that's why in hearings before our subcommittee, we asked that question in 2007. Still haven't gotten an answer. I asked that question by letter on February 9th of this year to the current USTR. Still haven't gotten an answer. And this is why the current ambassador to the United States from South Korea is on record as saying at Kaesong, when he was prime minister, that this agreement will pave the way for Kaesong-produced products to come into the United States duty-free. I can't think of, I just don't know which is worse, the national security aspect of huge dollars flowing to the government of North Korea, or the economic impact of telling American workers that they have to compete against products made at the labor rates that we find in Kaesong. My time has expired.
Thank you, Mr. Sherman.